totally impossible. It's completely and totally impossible. Now, if you look at the facts, you'll see you don't need any anthropological degree to be able to see the logic in this. So, they're saying that 5,000 years ago, these pyramids, which the Great Pyramids of Giza, have over 2 million stones. And every single stone is, a ton or more. And we're talking 30, 40, 50, 60, 70 plus ton stones. They're mined and quarried miles and miles away. Right, so they're actually cut out of huge pieces of rock, miles and miles away, multi-ton pieces of rock, transported to the site, put in perfect place. And what they're saying is that this was done in 20 years by farmers with vines and copper tools. Well, if that were true, what that would mean is that they would have to cut, quarry, transport, and perfectly stack these stones, one every 2 minutes. Right? The facts is that even right now, with all the money that we have, all the machines we have, we couldn't do that now. We couldn't even do that now. It's very obvious, right? And that's not even taking into account that the building is actually so perfect. And it's not actually perfect, but it's the closest building, especially for the scale and the size that it is, that exists on the entire Earth. Even the skyscrapers and the museums and all the greatest buildings that are built today, they're not built that precisely. It's built precisely. So precisely. We couldn't even if we tried to build a small scale one, we couldn't build it that precisely. So, what I'm saying is that you go through all this college, all this high school, you get this degree, this PhD, and what is it based on? It's based on some dogma. Now, the reason why the anthropologists believe that is they believe that because, according to the Bible, right, the earth actually was created. And life on earth was actually created at a certain point in time. And so there's no way that if that story is true and real, that there could be a civilization that was 12,000 years old, that had more advanced technology than we have now, that actually built those pyramids. Even if it makes way more logical sense, even if there's way more proof, which there is, there's way more proof that the pyramids were built by an ancient civilization 12,000 plus years ago with much more advanced technology than we have now. There's actually way more proof to that, let alone logic. And yet, the whole system, worldwide, disagrees with that, calls anyone a crackpot, or a crazy person, and keeps on this dogma, this ridiculous story. Well, all of school is like that. It's all the exact same way. It's the exact same thing. It's the exact same thing. History that you learn in school, it's history based on the story of the people that want you to know that history. It's crazy. It's ridiculous. So, even if you're learning, what are you actually learning? You're learning what the system wants you to learn. That's what you're learning. And what they really want is they want compliance. They want obedience. They don't want you to question. If you won't question the pyramids, you're not going to question anything. If you won't question that story, and that's what they teach you, and you're like, oh yeah, that must be it, and then you fill it out on the test, and you just agree that 5,000 years ago these pyramids were built with vines, and by the Egyptians, right? They're like, we got this crazy, we got this idiot, because it's so obvious, right? So you're not going to question 9/11. Oh yeah, of course, it was people in caves that just somehow got through the most advanced, military protected civilization on the entire earth, and flew around for hours around this most secure fly zone in the whole world, and just happened to be able to be not noticed, and crashed into these buildings, and then exploded the buildings, and they collapsed because of the planes hitting it. And no, I mean, it didn't look at all like there was tons of bombs and planted inside the building, and it collapsed in a total free fall, just like a demolition. Like, is obvious stuff. I mean, it's so obvious. You don't even need to do research to just be able to look at it and see that story's a lie. The story is a lie. And they're all over the place. I could talk for hours and hours and hours about some of the biggest stories that we know of that are complete and total lies. Right? So a conscious person, an awakened person, an empowered person questions everything. Everything. You question everything. And so I'm not asking you to believe me. I'm not saying believe me because I'm Quinn and I'm the most badass person you've ever met. What I'm saying is question what I say. If you can't prove what I'm saying to be wrong, then I'm probably right. And it's actually way easier to find the information of what I'm saying than it is to find the information to prove these stories that I'm talking about that are obviously lies. Because there is no facts. There is no data form. There's just a story. There's just a story. So we are a product of the story. We're a product of the education. Education really is just a story. And we're a product of that. So when we go to school, when we wake up every day, we're living a story that I don't have a choice in my life. What my passion is, what my desire is, it doesn't actually matter. And if I don't care about what my teachers care about and what my parents care about, then I'm stupid. I'm not worthy. And if I don't learn these things that I'm supposed to learn, I'm not going to be able to succeed in anything. I'm not going to have any money, I'm not going to find a mate because no one's going on a mate with a loser. People are going to look down upon me. Blah, 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 blah. Life isn't easy, it's hard. You got to work real hard for what you have, for what you want. There's a lot of very detrimental story going on. I am not an authority in my life. My teacher, my principal, my parents, even the freaking bus driver is an authority over my life. Obviously that bus driver isn't that successful. It doesn't make them a bad person because they drive a bus. I'm just saying, how come when you're a child, everyone has authority over your life except for you? Forget about the freaking pyramids and all the lies and the stories that are being taught in the education system, and let's look at the real profound realities of disempowerment. That's more detrimental than any story, is that disempowered state. Right? So all through school, this is happening. And every single day, there's just a little bit more compliance, a little bit more compliance, a little bit more compliance. It's totally normal. And guess what? Everyone you know, all the people you go to church with, all the people you go to summer camp with, all the people you go to school with, all the people you play your sports teams with, they all go to school too. And they've already been broken, and they've already agreed to that whole system as well. And so there really is no hope. There's no exposure. There's no exposure to anything else. Even all the freaking TV shows you watch, and all the news that you see, and all the movies that you see, it's coming through the same filter. It's coming through the same filter. Even before school, it's like you're a child, and you're born into this world, right? And you're extremely raw, totally alive, and connected with what's important to you. Right? And the only thing that's important to you is to be as close to your mother as possible, to drink and to suckle from that breast, that sweet, life-giving, nutritious, full, delicious milk. To sleep whenever you want to sleep for as long as you want, to be embraced, to be warm, to be comfortable, to be safe. That's it. You don't care about any money, you don't care about any power, you don't care about any success, you don't care what clothes you're wearing, you don't care what car you have, what house you're in, what toys you have. You don't care about anything except for those three basic simple things. Being as close to your mother as possible, having as much milk as you want, whenever you want, and sleeping as long as you want, whenever you want. That's it. Most children are denied even those three very simple and basic things. Most children, if they're even lucky enough to breastfeed, which, really, you have to see how ridiculous that is. There is no other purpose of a breast of a woman than to feed a child. Every single mammal on the entire earth does it, and they do it as much as they possibly can. The only mother that doesn't do it is one that's starving and therefore the children die, because there is no formula, there is no bottles. Right? The mother is either able to provide that milk or the child dies. So obviously the breasts with that milk are there for one purpose, and that's to feed that child. Everything else is inferior. Everything else is inferior to that milk, to that nutrition. So even children that are lucky enough, even though it shouldn't be lucky, you know, ideally it's a standard, it's a norm, right? Even a child that's lucky enough to breastfeed is still probably on a schedule, you know, because you get all these books, and this is education too. A parent, you know, gets a book. Okay, well, I have no idea how to be a parent. I better read a book that tells me how to be a parent and tells me who my child is and what my child's going to do and what's right and what's wrong and what's okay and what's not okay. And then that book says, you know, you've got to put your child on a feeding schedule, otherwise they're going to be, you know, needy and, you know, demanding, and, you know, they think they can get whatever they want whenever they want it, you know, they're going to be happy and stuff. Right? So you put that child on a feeding schedule. You know, you feed them this much, this often, blah, blah, blah. You know, you got to put them in a crib, because if you don't put them in a crib, they're not going to get used to being by themselves, and then they're going to be codependent their whole life, and they're never going to fit in with, you know, society and friends. You know, they're going to be, you know, blah, 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 blah. You know, you got to make sure that you put, you know, little plugs in all the sockets, because they're going to kill themselves. You know, you've got to make sure that you don't let them go around anything that's hard or sharp, because they're going to hurt themselves for sure. You know, you got to make sure you don't give them, you know, as much food as they want, because they're going to eat themselves to death. You know, like, their children are totally incapable. They're just, you know, pathetic, really. You know, you got to do everything for them. You got to do everything for them. Everything for them. They're totally incapable. Okay, well, that's a story. That's education. And that's a very common story. The fact is that if a child's born in a hospital, it's born to a mother that's totally and completely disempowered. And unfortunately, for most of the mothers that are going to hear this and listen to this, it's going to be you. It's going to be the case, because most children now are born in hospitals. And this isn't a bad thing. It doesn't make you a bad person. It's a fact. And if you're not ready to look at that fact and be responsible for that fact, there's no hope for you. There is no hope for you. If you give birth in a hospital, or if you were given birth in a hospital, your mother and or you are disempowered. Because the reality is that there's nothing more natural than knowing how to give birth. It's like knowing how to take a shit. You don't have to teach a child how to take a shit. They just take a shit because their body knows how. Birth is the same way. The only thing that gets in the way is the education and the story. You don't know how, 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 and it starts from birth. You don't know how much food you should eat or how often you should eat it. I'm going to tell you what food you're going to eat and how often you're going to eat it. You don't know what time to go to sleep or what time to wake up. I'm going to tell you what time to wake up. I'm going to tell you what time to go to sleep, because you don't know. You don't know what's good for you. I'm going to tell you what's good for you. You don't know what's wrong. I'm going to tell you what's wrong. So of course, by the time you're a 20, a 30-year-old woman, of course you don't know how to give birth, because you've completely disregarded your innate, empowered ability to do anything. Right? And the reality is that mothers still have this instinctual drive to make sure that their children are safe. And so a mother doesn't want anything more than to make sure that their children are safe, and yet her mind is completely and totally plagued by this fear of, I'm not capable. And this could go wrong, 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 because the whole educational system is telling you that having birth is dangerous. You could die, your child could die. Right? If you don't have some expert around, if you're not in a hospital, if you don't have the tools, your child could die. And even if you don't die, and even if your child doesn't die, well, guess what? It's going to be so painful. It's going to be so painful, you're not going to be able to handle it. So you're probably going to need drugs. So you definitely need to be in a hospital then, because otherwise it's just going to be so painful, you're going to wish that you were dead. That's a story. That's education that's being fed to women, to girls. Right? So of course that takes place. Now you're pregnant, and immediately you're like, oh my God, what if? This could go wrong, this could go wrong, this could happen, this could happen. I've never given birth before, I don't know how. Well, you could look at it two ways. One is, everything that we do at some point in time is the first time. And if you watch a child learn to walk, you know, the first time they learn to walk, right, you can tell they're not very good at it. You know, they're like, I can't even walk! I can't even keep my balance! You know, they're falling on their ass, right? Well, that's part of learning to walk. Falling is part of learning to walk. But guess what? They learn to walk. Because they already know how. It's actually more of just training their body, getting the muscles strong enough to walk. Right? So, giving birth is something you already know how to do. It's just, you don't believe that you know how to do it. You've been told you don't know how to do it. And you're not even willing to try. Now, in most ancient civilizations that were connected with this process, you know, the woman that was going to give birth, you know, she was grown up with a mother who gave birth to her. By a mother who gave birth to her. And so their story is, of course, we know how to give birth. My mother gave birth, and her mother gave birth, and her mother gave birth, and her mother gave birth. Guess what? If you're alive, a woman gave birth to you. Now, nowadays, most likely in a hospital, potentially even a planned C-section, you know, which is very convenient and fast, you know, fits into your work schedule nicely. But you were still born, you know, from your mother. And your mother's body grew that entire child without knowing how. Right? The reality is that if you're a woman, or if you were born, your body was grown inside of your mother, or you grew a child inside of yourself. From a little tiny cell, all the way to a being that has skin and bones and hair and eyes that can pick up all these depths of field, all these colors, ears that can hear all of these sounds, all of these variations. I mean, extremely complex and amazing things. That just happened. That's the miracle of life. And everything is the same. It's all the same. It's all the same. We're infinitely capable. But we're being taught, we're being educated in a story that we're not. And this is the real important thing. This is where the real power is. So, I could talk for hours and hours and hours about all the things in the education system that don't work, that are based on disempowerment, that are based on disconnection, that are based on, you know, lack, that are based on things that don't feel good. Or I could focus on and I could talk about how amazing life could really be.